What's going on, everyone? You're listening to the Aggie Nation Podcast. I'm Alex Miller with the Eagle, joined by Travis Brown. Travis, it is that time. They're playing basketball. It's basketball season.
Basketball. Okay, good. Yes, it is.
And the A&M men, at least, they've kind of gotten it going these last couple weeks after kind of a shaky start in December, and coming off this, we're recording Thursday, coming off a pretty impressive win against number 20 Missouri Wednesday night at Reed Arena.
Yeah, it's exactly what Buzz Williams has said. The game planning has been great. They've since that Wofford loss, they've kind of changed the way they've done practice. They've changed the way that they kind of looked at each player's role and how they've worked the rotation and what players are getting what minutes. And they've had really great game plans against what really has been three really, really different SEC schools and how they play. And with quick turnarounds in those. I mean, you go from Florida to start things off with Castleton, just a tall, dominating force, and the way they were able to play him, and then LSU with KJ Williams and a tall guy, but he has a little bit more shooting range. We're able to limit him, and then they had a completely different game last night against Missouri, which was one of the fastest and best offenses that they played. They were able to kind of muck the game up a little bit, slow it down, and weather some runs that they knew were probably going to happen with Missouri to win that game. It's been really impressive. It necessarily, it's different than the run they went on last year, because I think last year they just relied on, hey, we're going to play really high pressure, up tempo defense and go and try to get some transition buckets and do that. And this year it's been more nuanced. They've been able to adjust and change and work different game plans for different teams and have been really successful at it.
Well, A&M now, they are 11-5 overall, 3-0 in the SEC. They're a half game, I should say 1 game back from the lead. Alabama and Tennessee tied for first at 4-0. A&M's at 3-0. Auburn right behind at 3-1. A month ago, we were talking about, hey, A&M's really got to figure this out. I mean, this was the year that they were like, they needed to get to the NCAA tournament, and they just weren't getting it done. And now it's kind of flipped the script, and they're starting to look like a team that has a potential to make the postseason.
Yeah, the key aspects. If you're gonna follow a Buzz Williams team, you got to hone in your math, because so much of what they do is a math equation, and it's been that way since he's been here. They want to look at what the strengths of their team are. They want to look at the team that they're playing, and they're going to find where there is statistical wiggle room, that if they're not good at this stat, where can they get those points back? Where can they get those minutes back, or get those rebounds back, or possessions back? And they've done a really good job of balancing that equation this year. I mean, the crux of this team is their ability to get to the free throw line. They're second in the nation in free throw attempts, first at free throws made per game. They're going to do everything they can to get fouled and get to the free throw line. I mean, a huge part of getting that win yesterday and weathering the storm was getting to the bonus early in the second half, because then the way that Missouri was playing that really, really aggressive press, they weren't able to be as aggressive, because they knew that if they fouled, they were going to go to the free throw line, because A&M's when they were able to break the press against Missouri in that second half, their half-court offense stalled out a little bit. But when they were able to get to the free throw line, they could get fouled before even crossing the timeline at times and get to the free throw line, and it completely negated the kind of pressure that Missouri could put on. And as they started having a little bit of parade to the free throw line, Missouri was having to kind of back off a little bit by little on that press and not be quite as aggressive, and it opened up some space for A&M to get into the half court and get into their half court set with enough time to run and get a good shot. So it's all started with their ability to get to the free throw line, and then as of late, their ability to offensive rebound. They are now 18th in the country in offensive rebound percentage at 35.7%, and they've really improved on that as the season has gone on. Dexter Dennis, Julius Marble, Tyrese Radford among the tops of those guys to do that. So those are some ways that they haven't been necessarily a great three-point shooting team. At times in the season, they've gotten a lot better at this. At times, they've been really pretty terrible at the rim. They're a team that gets to the rim a lot. That's how they get fouled. But making those shots has been a little bit of a struggle. They were really good at that the last 2 games. But they've been able to mitigate that with offensive rebounds. You know, you miss that layup, you get a rebound, you put another one up, and you get points that way. And they've been able to generate points without having to speed up the game by getting free throws. The equation is working well for them right now.
You know, last night I was at the game, A&M, Missouri, and was spectating, got to just kind of take it all in. And, you know, something that stood out to me was it seems like Henry Coleman and Julius Marble, they really complement each other well. And adding Marble down there at the block, I mean, it seems like that's really helped. I mean, last year Coleman was so good and was a consistent presence, but I feel like A&M adding a second piece and being able to and at times when they had both of them on the court, I mean, it seemed like that was a really good duo A&M's got going so far.
Julius Marble is for everything that Henry Coleman did last year, and he was great with the ball at times last year. Julius Marble is even more confident with the ball. He's stronger. He is as close to a Josh Nebo as A&M has had since Josh Nebo, with a guy that makes strong post moves, is strong with the ball, can go up and finish. I mean, even last night, he had a Dirk-esque turnaround one-legged fadeaway jumper that fell at the buzzer. That was really impressive. He has a really well-rounded post game, which enables them to, when they have both Coleman and Marble on the floor, bring Coleman out and pull a taller defender out of the paint and open up some space for their guys to work off dribble penetration, because when Coleman is at his best, he can dribble penetrate a little bit and work off the dribble into the paint to score. So I think that's been a big help. But they've been really good with just one of those guys on the floor. I mean, you saw a lot of Solomon Washington last night, who still has to kind of work to pick up the offensive side of his game. He's not quite there and not quite SEC ready yet, but he was recruited. I mean, I talked to one of his trainers and kind of select coaches a couple weeks ago, and he said his nickname was the 5-star defender because or the 5-star stopper.
Yeah, the 5-star stopper.
Because he was just a lockdown defender, and that's kind of how he made his name and made his bread and butter, was being that defender. And they had him marked up on Kobe Brown for a decent amount of time last night, and were able to kind of shut him down after Kobe Brown went on a little bit of a run there early. So they have a good rotation. Basically, you'll see for their rotation to work, they need either Tyrese Radford or Dexter Dennis on the court at all times, because they're great rebounders. They're guys that play great defense, and they can get into the paint on dribble penetration. So you'll pretty much there hasn't really been a time when one of those guys hasn't been on the court, and everything kind of works around those two guys.
You know, I went to the game last night with my sister, and she, of course, had to comment on Julius Marble's mustache. And she told me that it looks like Chick Hicks from Cars, and I thought that was kind of rude. I thought it was more of a Goose from Top Gun kind of mustache, but Marble's got it going. That is a solid stash.
I mean, he's not quite Steve Harvey, because that's like the pinnacle of mustache. Like that's like that's like you've really reached the pinnacle when you get to. But it's like, it's closer there on the spectrum than anything else.
Hey, how about that Rubik's Cube kid too? I mean, he kind of stole it. To me, it was kind of like a small scale when A&M played Mississippi State in football a couple years ago, and they had the bird.
Yes.
It was kind of like the bird. And that kid, they showed him at one timeout, and he almost got it done. And then the game had to they actually played that kid doing the Rubik's Cube like 10 seconds into the game resuming on the Jumbotron, and then they finally had to cut it. But him they go back to him at the next time out and he finishes it. Hilarious to see just the crowd go wild for that kid.
How crazy is the SEC this year?
Yeah.
Because
getting back to real basketball talk.
Yeah. How crazy is the SEC this year? Because Kentucky's picked to be the preseason champion, followed by Alabama, Arkansas, Tennessee. Those right now, Tennessee is on top with their number 2 ranked net, followed by Alabama, Arkansas, Auburn, Missouri, Mississippi State, Florida, and then Kentucky. Kentucky has had a very, very down year this year. And Tennessee, Alabama, Arkansas, Auburn, might say has had a little bit of a down year this year from what they've been able to do. There is a lot of strong teams. Don't get me wrong. That's let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the top 50 in the net, but it might not be the exact order or the arrangement that one might have thought that it would have shaken out. I mean, even Vanderbilt, who's 107. South Carolina's lower than, but South Carolina beat Kentucky in their last game, and South Carolina, who the Aggies have this week. It's kind of been this weird year where you kind of know where people are going to be, but there's been some upsets, and I think from the outsider looking in, who didn't quite know what Texas A&M had this year and saw what their non-conference was going to be, you might say that last night was a little bit of an upset, and maybe against Florida a little bit of an upset too. I mean, that's already 2 quad 1 wins for the Aggies.
Yeah, and you kind of look at where the rest of the schedule's going for the rest of the month. I mean, on the road at South Carolina, that's probably a winnable game. They already beat Florida and they get them at home. You think that's a winnable game, and then as vulnerable as Kentucky has been, if A&M's 5-0 going to Lexington, you feel about as confident as you can going to Kentucky. I think A&M's only ever beat Kentucky one time on the road, back when Elston Turner had his crazy game. But I mean, it's starting to set up to where A&M's got a pretty favorable little schedule here now. They have 3 of 4 on the road, and Auburn is a really hard place to play. It has become a hard place to play. And then you get Vanderbilt at home, and Arkansas on the road's tough. But you kind of look ahead and you're like, okay, A&M can, if they can keep playing like they have, I mean, they've got some winnable games to where they can get back in tournament contention and discussion pretty quickly. Yeah,
I mean, right now, if you look at Ken Palm, he has them going 18-13 and 10-8, which is a vast improvement from what they had them to start the season. Playing around with some of the numbers and things on these sites, A&M pretty much needs to get to 12 conference wins. So they need to, right now they don't have them winning at Kentucky. I think you can chalk that down as it probably should be a win for A&M.
Does that include the conference tournament or just regular season?
Does not. And I think Buzz Williams has a point from the way things shook out last year that, they need to be in a good spot prior to the conference tournament, because they did work in the conference tournament last year, and it didn't really do anything. It
didn't matter
to help them. So you really need to be in the right position, in a good position at that point. I mean, you look at you think Kentucky would be a win. That's one that they have a loss on here, and you would think that maybe Missouri away might be a win too, or Ole Miss away might be a win there. You nab 2 or 3 of those, and then you're looking at a pretty good spot. There's a fun little website called barttorvik.com, another one of these basketball analytics guys, and the thing called Teamcast, where you can kind of play a little bit with wins and losses, and with their algorithms, you can kind of see where they seed. And if you have them winning those 3 games, Kentucky, away at Missouri, away at Mississippi, and then winning the other games that they're supposed to win this season, that puts them on the 9 line. Right now, according to them, as they sit, they're 14 spots out of the last 4 in. But they still have a lot of opportunities. They, at least as it sits now, they have the opportunity for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 more quad 1 wins.
Yeah, that's a good amount of opportunities.
Right.
Like at the end of it, if you're just on the outside looking in, you can't say we didn't have a chance to get in. because they definitely have chances to get in.
And some of this, it's not a 100% spot on tool, because there's other things happening. There's going to be other upsets in there and other teams that help or hurt A&M. But just it's a pretty good indicator. I mean, last year they had them right there at either last four in or first four out as you played around with it, and that's kind of what it turned out to be. So you can kind of get a little bit of a gauge of what they need to do in the future. Buzz Williams presented it to his team in the sense that you're supposed to win your home games.
Right.
You're not supposed to win your road games. So they kind of have this little simple algorithm, and it's interesting because when you talk to coaches about, the cliche is, well, it's just about the next game. Well, I think they realized from last year that you need to have a little bit of a bigger picture while still kind of keeping a focus on the next one. And I've kind of thought this was interesting, this plus-minus system. So if you win on the road, you get a +1. If you lose on the road, it's a 0. If you win at home, it's a 0 because that's what you're supposed to do. And if you lose at home, it's a -1. And so they kind of just, as the season goes on, I mean, right now they are a +1 because they won at Florida and have won twice at home in SEC. He said he thinks they need to get to a +3, +4 situation to be able to make the tournament. That's not factoring in net. That's an overly simplified thing, but it is an interesting way to present it to the team where they have a little bit of an idea of the big picture, but they are also focused on, okay, well, we just need to get to +1 today or hold serve if they're at home to get to the next game to kind of reach that +3 margin. It's kind of one of those ones that you think if they can get there and they turn around and look back, things will probably have shaken out the way that they have wanted to in terms of net rankings and quadrant 1 wins and all those things that the committee takes into account.
We talk about all this and haven't even mentioned that Manny Obaseki's hurt. He's going to be out probably at least the rest of the month of January, at least, maybe a little bit into February. Got, broken hand? Broken hand.
He had surgery last week. Buzz Williams, as of last week, said it was going to be a 4 to 6 week recovery. He was at the game and had it's his shooting hand. He's left-handed in a sling. It's been interesting to see how they've, instead of subbing someone into that spot, they've really just increased them. They've shortened or shrunk the rotation. The way things have worked past your starting lineup of Julius Marble, Henry Coleman, Tyrese Radford, Dexter Dennis, and Wade Taylor, they've pretty much always gone, and usually in the same substitution, with Andre Gordon and Anderson Garcia to come in as kind of defensive sparks. They aren't going to be necessarily guys that get you a lot of points, but Anderson Garcia is like second on at least as of last week, was second on the team in Hakeem rate, which is blocks and steals per 100 possessions, and the top net rate of lineups has those two guys in it. So that's, you look at the amount of points a team can score in 100 possessions. That's your offensive rate. How many points that they allow defenses to score, that's your defensive rate. And then the difference between those is your net rate. They have a really high defensive rate, and that helps their net rating on those guys. In essence, it's their best lineups. They're doing their best jobs, and they have those two guys in there. Now, the offensive rate is higher when you have one of either Marble and Coleman who gets subbed out there for that guy, or Dexter Dennis or Wade Taylor with one of those guys comes in. But basically, Obaseki had been a good defensive and good dribble penetration guy at the point when he had been playing this year, and they've kind of just used that as a time to give Andre Gordon a little bit more minutes to kind of provide that defensive spark and help play what has been really strong defense through SEC play.
Well, Travis, as we kind of wrap up our basketball talk, A&M's got, like we said, 2 probably winnable games next week with South Carolina and Florida, and then 2 good road tests against Kentucky and Auburn. As they start to look in the next 2 weeks, what do you think the Aggies need to do, or what are you looking to see from them as they try to, maybe separate themselves as maybe a contender, or could potentially just fall into the middle of the pack and kind of just a wild SEC that we've seen early on?
I mean, they they need to just keep winning. As easy as that sounds, because really and truly, until they get to Auburn, the next 3 games are winnable. South Carolina is the worst net ranked team. They can't afford to take another quad 4 loss. They have to win at South Carolina. Florida, they had a great game plan against, and it's at home. Those mirror games are always interesting because of how Florida's seen how A&M has changed things up. There won't be quite as much of a surprise.
Quick turnaround too.
It'll be interesting to see how that one goes. And then Kentucky now all of a sudden seems really winnable, even though it's on the road. And I think they need, if they can extend that, really, if you look at their schedule, it is really back heavy. When you look at the really tough tests, you're going to have a little stretch here in the middle with Auburn and Arkansas, but they're kind of interspersed between, there's a Vanderbilt, there's a Georgia, there's an LSU, there's some winnable games in there. But then the last stretch is Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, Mississippi State. Then they have Ole Miss, which should be winnable, and then Alabama. That is a tough stretch when you look at how things are playing out in the net and how some of those teams are playing. So this is the time that they really need to, if you want to look at that plus minus, start getting that plus minus higher, because there could be a couple of losses there at the end. And you don't want that to turn into a snowball like it did last year. Maybe just a blip here or there, and already have some goodwill in the bank that maybe if there's a couple losses towards the end of the season, that they've already kind of racked up quad 1 wins and gotten their Ken Palm ranking, their net ranking up higher, so that it doesn't vacillate too much.
Well, basketball season in full swing. Follow Travis for all of his coverage on A&M men's basketball. Follow Robert Sessna for all his coverage on A&M women's basketball. But A&M football, they have hired an offensive coordinator, Bobby Petrino. Stay tuned for the next segment of the Aggie Nation Podcast. We'll have Bob Holt of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette kind of giving a look into what A&M can expect to see from Bobby Petrino.